All meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening. Welcome to the January 19th study session for your Brookings City Council. Ask City Clerk to record attendance, please.
Mayor and council members, as we are all not in the same location this evening, please recall with present when I call your name. Bacon.
Present.
Brink.
Present.
Collins.
Present.
Corbett.
Present.
Niemeyer.
Present.
Wendell.
Present.
Councilmember Tilton Burn is absent this evening.
Thank you. All right, council entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Okay, well, somebody got it. All right, any discussion on that? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Niemeyer.
Aye.
Wendell.
Aye.
Bacon.
Aye.
Brink.
Aye.
Collins.
Aye.
Corbett.
Aye. Okay, the agenda is approved. Open forum. Anyone have anything they'd like to bring before the council at this time? I think everybody's guess why everybody's here. So, all right, we'll close that portion of the council. Tonight's a study session. Most of us know that we have those once a month. It's an opportunity for the council to do a deep dive into topics or a topic that maybe a council member wanted to have on the agenda to discuss. So it's just a wonderful opportunity also for the public. There's no action taken tonight, but the council may recommend something be moved forward for action at a later date. So at this time, I'd open it up to the city manager. Well, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. Within the 2021 budget, City Council approved a new process where we would work through the Brookings United Way to make recommendation to City Council. The United Way did accept applications for all city funding this year for social service agencies. A rubric was created based on City Council's direction and recommendations this past fall. A team of volunteers through the United Way, educated in Brookings social service needs, prioritized those fundings, and that recommendation is brought before City Council this evening. For 2021, budgeted approximately $225,000 to commit towards social service agencies. However, in December, the City Council committed an additional $41,000 to outside agencies because of COVID and the impacts to our community. Therefore, the United Way is presenting tonight the recommendation of funding 11 agencies with approximately $266,500. I know Heidi with United Way is here to present the recommendations and answer any questions council might have of either the recommendation, the rubric, the process, or any follow-up reporting as well.
We should mention next week's city council agenda for action item. Heidi, come on up and introduce yourself.
Brookings Area United Way. Kind of sets it straight out here. We can see who applied and for how much. We can see the dollars we had to Brookings Activity Center. Just this funding source wasn't quite the right situation for what they were asking for, so that's why we see a zero there. Great program, and we fund them through United Way funds. This just wasn't the right avenue for what they were looking for. So working with them on some other places to try to fund their shortfall as well. But really, if there's any questions, otherwise we can keep moving on.
Also have any questions for Heidi or put Paul on the spot? Councilman Wendell?
My question is for Paul. Can you reiterate the source of the $41,000 additional dollars we committed to the agency funding?
Certainly. So last year, approximately $35,000, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, so hopefully it's somewhat correct. Approximately $35,000 wasn't needed from Beta. Beta was actually able to augment those funds from the federal government, so they gave those funds back. And then the community band didn't hold any events this last year, and I think it was close to 6,000. So that's where the 41,000 comes from. So we were able to make a recommendation to council to redistribute those as part of the funding this year.
Any other council members have questions? Okay, as we said, this will be on the agenda next week for hopefully passage. So Heidi, thanks again for all your work on this.
You bet.
It's a great plan. Well, once again, I'll turn it over to the city manager for a presentation on future growth of the city of Brookings.
And just to clarify real quick, Mike, is it the first link or the second link? This one?
Yes.
Alrighty. All right. And for those individuals that are watching from home, if you some difficulties, that was just us updating the website. And so encourage people to go back, look at this link. It'll be available even after this presentation. But the leadership at Brookings asked that the staff put together a presentation of the future growth of our community. And I, in turn, turned this over to the DRT, the Development Review Team. And for those people watching or those that don't know, Development Review Team is a group of individuals, department heads in the city, also with BMU leadership, that get together once a week to look at city codes, city policies, trying to understand how it can be better and efficient in our process to expedite the process, but also ensure that we're protecting neighborhoods and what Brookings is trying to grow here within this community. And so with the DRT, with the advancements that Aaron Carl, our GIS individual who's here with us tonight, put together this presentation. GIS, for those that don't know, is a geographical software system that allows us to input data, specifically infrastructure, but also allows us to make projections and do analysis to ensure that we're providing the best product for our citizens. So Aaron and the team from BMU and other staff members put together this presentation for us to share. I just get to talk, which it's great to have such great staff members here, including Mike and Jackie tonight. Two caveats with this presentation that I'd like to mention. Number one, all of this is predicated on a plan, and that plan is the comprehensive plan, which is a 20-year document. The other caveat is that it's always subject to change, and that change occurs based on whether and how the landowner wants to develop, how a developer wants to move forward with their projects, but also the public infrastructure and investment that you have made as City Council, not only into infrastructure, but also policy as well. So with us tonight, we'll have not only Jackie and Mike present, but also Steve Meyer from BMU. Steve will be talking about infrastructure related to BMU, but once again, we're partners and we constantly communicate on these issues. So in order to talk about the future, we really have to start from where we are today. And so if you look at this map before us, it's color-coded and it's based on zoning. And so it gives you roundabout numbers. So if we look at this, we have roughly 2,951 acres of residential land, which equates to right around 9,930 residential units. Now, unique to Brookings, because we are a university town, half of those residential units are owner-occupied, the other half are rental-occupied. Once we get this system up and going, my hope is to add census data and other data so we can do analysis to understand the differences between a grid system and the current system that we have for development of residential area, but more importantly, ensuring that we're using land appropriately. Within this map, you'll also see that we have right around 9,930 total, I'm sorry, that was housing units, but 1,000, close to 1,050 acres of industrial land, which is located in the purple, and in the business, 621 acres. Once again, the zoning dictates what could go into these areas, but just as importantly, the developer and the process going to the Planning Commission and then ultimately to you as City Council.
Here is just a quick snippet of some of the demographics of Brookings. This was taken, we picked a location at 8th Street South and Madera Avenue and did about a 3-mile radius. So it does take in a little bit of the rural areas just outside of Brookings, but for the most part, you can see total population of just over 25,000. One thing I'd like to kind of call to your attention is the lower right-hand corner, which is the households by income. This graph shows that about 48.5% of our households make less than $50,000. So keep that in mind as we look at different projects as they come forward. If we want to address some of the affordability issues with housing, looking at where almost half of our households, what their income range is, and how do you really address some of those issues, and what sort of housing is needed to fit those income brackets. So here is our future land use map, and the one thing to keep in mind as development projects are brought forward, for the Planning Commission, the City Council, is all of it is based upon kind of our guiding policy, which is our comprehensive plan, which provides the guidance anytime a land use decision comes forward. And so one of the unique things with this comprehensive plan versus some of the ones we've done in the past is this is intensity based. And so with the intensity based, what they looked at is the different types of land use intensities, whether it be urban low intensity, urban medium intensity, urban high intensity, or uh, urban low density residential, medium density residential, and high density residential. There are various options of zoning that can fit within those intensity zones. So it provides a little bit of flexibility to the developer, but also provides a guidance on approximately how many units per acre or the types when you get into commercial or industrial areas. We don't necessarily call them out specifically as commercial industrial, but it's more the urban, low, medium, and high density. And we look at what is that land use intensity and is it appropriate to be in close proximity to various residential type uses. And so the comp plan is based upon a lot of studies, population projections, economic analysis, environmental trends, and more importantly is it was about an 18-month process that had a series of public workshops where the public was invited to come in and provide their input. This is really the community's plan.
So as we go forward, one thing that I forgot to mention, these maps for people viewing at home or if council wants to go back and look, it's very interactive. You can zoom in, zoom out, you can click some of the data, and it'll give you some of the information that we've been plugging into the system. So as Mike just talked about the future land use map, keep into mind these areas. This is a very important map which shows the areas in which we can grow. Once again, Brookings has a natural ring put around it, which prohibits our growth, and it's based on soil conditions, groundwater, and other floodplains. This area here in the red is severe areas. The purple and blue are moderate to low limitations and should require some regulations in growing into those areas. But if you look at the future land use map, and I'll scroll real quick to this one, you can kind of see, and I say this is kind of like a human heart, the Brookings heart, if you will. It's really restricted by those low-lying areas. You can see through the future land use map these green spaces that were put in here, and they weren't put in there arbitrarily. They're put in there because of this map here. And this map will really dictate our growth as we move forward and how we grow as a community in those areas that we have available to grow. One of the things that we need to look at as we continue to have this discussion is the amount of land that we have available and how are we ensuring that we're good stewards of the land. Going back to that data that I mentioned earlier, once the census is done, the grid system versus the current system. The preliminary plat that came to you last week from Habitat, great example of a good use of building a neighborhood while having connectivity with roads. But also, we have to look at how it works with our park system, our transportation system, and once again, just a lot of analysis that we can do now that we have this GIS system. But as we go on throughout this discussion, keep this map in mind. And the great thing with Aaron and Mike is that they put this all into a layered system so we can plug and play any map we want to put layers upon layers to really dive into this system, especially as the DRT continues to have these discussions.
This map here talks about our residential growth area, and this is just the available land that's shaded in red is currently within city limits. And so we're going to show you talk through two scenarios. So our current trends, how development is currently occurring in the city of Brookings is about 50% of the land is low density residential, 10% is medium density, and 40% is high density. When you equate that out based upon our average household size in Brookings, which is about 2.3 people per household, you come up with approximately 2,150 total housing units, which equates to just a little bit over 4,900 in population. When you take that based upon our 10-year building permit trends, that equates to just shy of 15 years of land available. If we were to change our development patterns and look at an efficiency model, where our low-density residential decreases from 50% down to 30%. We increase that medium-density residential from 10 to 30% and leave the high density the same. We can accomplish about 2,900 housing units during that same time period, which equates to a population of just over 6,700, which essentially extends out that same land area that you see in red, extends it out an additional 5 years of building opportunities there. Just being more efficient in how we utilize the available land and the available infrastructure investments that have been made within the community. On the industrial development side, we currently show about 57 acres available for industrial development. That's in the purple. Our future land use did identify an additional 300 plus acres, primarily to the northeast, which would be north of the Svennis Industrial Park. But there's also an area over west of the airport, and that was primarily targeted that in case there's any growth in those types of industries that could utilize an airport like Brookings, providing opportunities for them. A lot of our development out by the airport has been along 2nd Street South, but the available land in that area is being consumed. And so here was an area on the west side that if some of those air-based industries expressed an interest, this was an area that could be designated for a future industrial type area. On the commercial side, we currently have about 226 acres inside city limits. Now, the caveat to that is we did include the research park because that does allow for business activity up there. However, you're probably not going to see the level of retail development in the research park that you might find along 6th Street or 20th Street South. But we do have some existing commercial space available for developers, for businesses if they chose to seek those opportunities. This map here shows our annexation priority map. The light tan-ish color, primarily on the west side, that's priority area number 1. The yellow being number 2, and the green areas being 3. And that's primarily looking at where infrastructure can be readily advanced into those areas, as well as utilizing existing infrastructure that's in place, and it's just a logical extension. Now, please keep in mind that because the area shows up as a priority area for annexation does not necessarily mean that it's developable land. It may be a means of getting to developable land, and you can kind of see that, south of the soccer complex, as well as there's some areas that are already developed when you get south of 32nd Avenue, like into the River Run or River Ridge area. My apologies. But that's a means to get to undeveloped land even further south.
This map here shows the stormwater system that isn't compromised of pipe system shown in purple and then the channelized system shown in green. And Brookings is kind of interesting where we're sort of built on a knoll, elevation knoll, where the northeastern part of Brookings drains easterly, the northwestern part drains northwesterly, and then 2/3 or so of the city drains southerly. And really kind of coming together at that Madera Avenue and 20th Street South location. So, and of course, we're surrounded by floodplains, as you can see in the pink area there. So we do have some challenges as we grow to the south and we work with our different topography that we have. To the south, we have a lot flatter slopes to deal with, and so that makes it a little more difficult to flow water. And then as well as we have high groundwater table, and sometimes we'll find poor subsurface soils. And so we're looking at all those different factors as we grow to the south. Back when I started 30 years ago, we did look at drainage, but it was a lot smaller aspect of our studies that we do now. We have new ordinances that we adopted in 2006 requiring drainage plans, and really looking at drainage as a pretty key function on new developments. And as we grow to the south too, we'll be taking into consideration different best management practices, looking at green infrastructure, perhaps some homes won't have basements, and trying to implement projects that benefit water quality as well as water quantity. So if we can have projects or even a retrofit project that achieves both of those goals, that's always our priority to be able to achieve those. And this map here does show a few of our upcoming projects. We have our next drainage projects being Jefferson Avenue area, shown in orange. It's a little bit hard to see right there. That will be in 2021, a storm sewer improvement project. Fifth Avenue storm sewer is slated for next year. Now that Sixth Street has upsized their storm sewer piping, we can expand upon that and then connect a larger pipe system to that. And our big project that is underway right now is 15th Street South and 7th Avenue South. As we finish our 404 permit for our channelized channel drainage system, we'll be building that, and there'll be both a street and a drainage project. It will have corresponding detention pond that will attach to the street pipe system. And then even this year, we did the parking lot permeable pavers in the Bob Sheldon project. So that was really exciting. We're anxious to see how those function here during our next storms, and really look at the results of that project. And then as far as our street projects go, the city council did adopt a policy years ago about who pays for streets. And so the policy is that every street, collector and residential, a collector street is paid for at a residential street cost, and then the city pays the extra width and thickness costs for those. And so 15th Street South and 7th Avenue South is a good example of, those are both collector streets where the city's paying the oversize as well as frontage costs on that. Another collector street system we have in our CIP is Western Avenue, both north and south of 20th Street South. Those as well would be a partial assessment where the city pays the extra width and thickness, and then there could potentially be an assessment to the property owners based on that current policy. And we have those streets slated in 2024 and 2023, I believe, is the other segment. 16th Avenue to the west of Timberline Addition is also a collector street. However, that was in a TIF district to cover part of the cost of constructing that street. And then we do have 22nd Avenue, which will be constructed in phases. 22nd is an arterial street, and we're using the state improvement funds to pay for that roadway system, and that'll be done in segments. And then, of course, we have the 20th Street South interchange, which will be coming up here and being bid this fall, and then construction starting in 2022. And next, I believe we have utilities, so we'll step aside for Brookings staff, or BMU staff.
Hey, I'm Steve Meyer, and thank you for allowing me to present here tonight. We at the utilities put a lot of effort into providing for capacity for growth and also the reliability in our systems that will promote that growth. So I feel real fortunate to have this opportunity. I will start off with our wastewater fund. I guess the display that we have shows our wastewater plant located at the south end of town there. That plant was built in the 1970s, but we have recently meaning 5 years ago, expanded that plant and renovated that plant in 2015. We think we have growth capabilities out to about 2035 in the capacity in that plant. Also, looking at the display there, you'll see the heavy green lines. Those are the large collector lines of the wastewater system, and they really are the workhorses of the collection system. We're continually monitoring those systems for the capacity that's left in those systems and the remaining useful life. And they are reaching some of their useful life. And we have plans that started this year in 2020 that will go out to 2027 that will replace and expand most of those large collector lines. We expect to invest about $10 million in those projects out into the future. We have several other major collection lines that we are monitoring. We're actually monitoring all of the collection lines and replacing or repairing those lines or expanding the size of those lines as they need those. We usually try to coordinate those projects with the city street projects because a major cost in repairing those systems or replacing them is the replacement of the streets. Similar to what Jackie talked about with the street oversizing, we also prepare for growth with an oversizing policy. So as the developers are building, are improving their property with wastewater infrastructure, our engineers analyze those systems, and if there is a possibility that there will be growth exceeding the standard in that area, or there'll be growth that, contiguous pieces of property are going to possibly benefit from that system, we will upsize that project. We will oversize that project, and the cost of the incremental cost of expanding that project will be expanded onto the rate base. We'll pay for that part of the project. So our engineers are also constantly working on making sure the systems are put in at the proper grade so that we can get the maximum extended life and extension out of that grade for the wastewater system. You'll notice on the map there, it's a little bit, Jackie explained it a little bit, same thing we're doing here, that the different shades show the different direction that the water is draining into those large collector pipes. So you can see what we call this our sewer shed map. So the topographical, flow is exactly as Jackie explained it too. So the northwest part is flowing northwest, the southern third is flowing south, and the east side is flowing into that east side collection system. So in our water department, water area, water utility, I'll start off with the plants again. We have two plants, one on the north side of town, one on the east side of town. The north side, that plant was constructed in the 1930s. It's ready to be replaced. We expect to be replacing that plant in the next 2 or 3 years. It currently provides 2 million gallons of peak capacity, and the east water plant provides 4 million gallons. The east plant, or the north plant, is going to be replaced with a 6 million gallon plant. So we will be increasing the capacity from 6 million total to 10 million total with that plant replacement. Another area that I want to focus on with the council is our aquifers, the red U-shaped structures, our drawings up there. That is our Aquifer Protection Zone. In the late 1980s, our county adopted the Aquifer Protection ordinance that protects the purity of that water in those areas. That's where we draw our our water from. We also have an extensive monitoring systems of monitoring wells that Eric maintains, monitoring the quality of that water in our source of water. We have been I guess, visiting and giving input on at any chance we can on the county wellhead protection ordinance to try to keep that ordinance modern and protecting our source of water. Those protections are sometimes uncertain. There are about 3,000 acres of protection zoned, and in the last 2 years, the utility board has elected to purchase property that has come up for sale just north of our wells on the north plant, where the board purchased about 200 acres, and just north of our east well field, where the board elected to purchase about 160 acres. We feel that is probably planning for centuries instead of decades. So it is something we have to stay vigilant about protecting those wellhead areas. You might have noticed we replaced one of our water towers. That water tower is on 4th Street. We will be taking down the water tower on 6th Street, but the impact of those changes will not only replace the end-of-life structures, but increase our storage capacity by 100,000 gallons. So the replacement strategies and the oversizing policies work just like the wastewater policies. So again, adding capacity for growth. In our electric enterprise, you'll see in your diagram there, I want to start off with making a little a bullet point edit here. I neglected to include to say anything about our power supply in our last presentation, so I'll just make a couple comments on that. We receive our power supply from 2 entities. We receive 19 megawatts from the federal water hydro projects, and we receive the other 41 megawatts from a joint action agency called Missouri River Energy Services, which is a group of 60 cities similar to us that have gone together and share generating sources for power. I'm mentioning this particularly because the federal hydropower we are locked into that allocation of 19 megawatts. That's a fixed amount that won't be increased, and it is a very low price source of power. The Missouri River Energy Services power is a good source of power and a very competitively priced source of power. It is one of the lower priced sources of power in the region. So, but I wanted to mention the WAPA power is not as certain as the MRES power is. We are continually challenged to hang on to that allocation of federal power. So there has been threatening federal litigation in the past. You'll see on the diagram our transmission system. That's the thick blue line or thick red lines on your diagram. Our 6 substations are also positioned on that diagram. You'll see that it is the architecture here is a very I guess dependable system because of that architecture. Those interlocking rings provide a lot of reliability. The system can have a fault or breakdown in any one area. They can reroute the power through switching in those substations to isolate those outages and provides for a very reliable system. It is a 115 kV system, which is a very, very high capacity system. So we have a good deal of growth, probably 30, 40 years of growth in that system. The distribution system, you see the dotted lines, they are still fairly high voltage lines. Underneath there are several other distribution voltages lines that this diagram would look like a bowl of spaghetti if we showed the detail of those things. But it all comes down to a very, very reliable system. We have an outstanding reliability record with the system. Probably similar to one of the things that I mentioned on the from the federal legislation, our biggest threat for our continuing growth, I think, is the threat of state legislation to limit our service territory, limit our ability to serve all our citizens. We've been doing that and serving those citizens since 1898, and recently we've faced some challenges. I believe it's a big component of Brookings' ability to grow. Our low rates, the profitability of the enterprise, its ability to transfer to the city council, the reliability of that system, and also protecting our citizens' right to local control of their electric provider. I think, again, we have to remain vigilant protecting that service territory rights. Just going to close with a couple comments on our telephone enterprise. We have does business as Swiftel Communications. We are an incumbent local exchange carrier. We have been in business providing voice service since 1903. That enables us to receive universal service funding, and we take on the responsibility of the carrier of last resort. So any customer in Brookings has rights to our service. Regardless of the profitability of that customer, we are obligated to serve that customer. We do operate a video and ISP business that are competitive. We own a fiber optic network that serves every home in Brookings. We own a fiber facility to Sioux Falls. That is a looped system also to Sioux Falls, serves a lot of our key industries and institutions in Brookings. And we're also a SDN member owner. SDN is a South Dakota data transport company, and they have also partnerships to serve many of the surrounding states. So I think if you look at our displays, I think we're well positioned to serve those growth opportunities in those future land use areas that Mike displayed earlier. So
Thanks,
I know
Steve.
you told me I could talk for an hour, Paul, but
You didn't
but
see the amendment
these
to
guys
that.
didn't look like they could take it.
Appreciate it, Steve. Well, Council, this is an abbreviated version, I guess I'll tell you, of the prior presentation. But at the end of the day, the possibilities of this system, all the data and the lines that you saw here is just the beginning. With Aaron and Mike and the rest of the crew, a lot of information that we could put into the system, not only for the user. I know we've talked about putting our capital improvement plan in here so that people can hit it, understand what year things are going to happen, where it's going to happen, to operations. We've talked about how we can input our snow routes, input our trash service so we can be better at the routes, ensuring that we're saving staff time as well as fuel. One example that Mike's crew just did here recently, Aaron developed an app for sidewalks snow removal. In the past, it would take 2 code enforcement officers about 1 day to send out 30 letters. They're able to send out 250 in 3 hours. That means we're going to get sidewalks cleaned a lot faster, but you might also receive calls from those letters as well. So at the end of the day, we're trying to use the process to make our systems more effective and efficient, especially when it comes to decision makings. With developers, we have someone come in wanting to locate next to high energy line or wastewater system. We can show them immediately where those potential possibilities are. Or as developers and people come in that want to talk about developing their land, we talk about proper zoning, the potential for the site, opportunities, the process to go through the planning commission as well as the city council. And that's what the DRT, the Development Review Team, is really set up for. So anyone watching at home, looking at developing their land, wants to talk more about residential development, commercial, industrial, encourage them to go to our website. We have a page dedicated to DRT. Jake, our Assistant City Manager, is the leader of that team, but we have a lot of great people on there as well. So with that, I'd turn it over to City Council. But just know the guidance that we give to the DRT and to our employees is that, we can use this system to develop residential neighborhoods, but really we want to develop neighborhoods at the end of the day and to build a place where people can bring their dreams.
Well, thank you to everybody who put this together and presenting it. And I know, like City Manager said, you presented to Leadership Brookings, and a lot of great comments came out of that. Some of also from some developers that have said how important the DRT is by cutting down their time by at least 3 to 4 months in planning. So the public knows that. Council, you have questions or comments? Councilman Wendell.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is on slide 3. Mike, I thought there was a lot of compelling information on that slide. A couple things jumped out to me that I wanted to ask a couple follow-up questions on. The 25,000 population number, does that include SDSU students, and how do we parse part-time residents or SDSU students out of that population count?
So according to the on-campus housing, like in the dorms, they're called group quarters, and so they're included. Off-campus residents, if they live here 6 months of the year or more, are supposed to count in Brookings. That's always a challenge, trying to get a full and accurate count, because oftentimes students feel that they need to be counted back at their permanent residence where their parents maybe claim them on tax form or something. But according to the census, if they live here 6 months of the year or more, they are supposed to be counted here.
So would it be a fair statement to say the lion's share of that attend classes in person are included in that 25,000 number?
Correct.
And so would they also be reflected in the income demographic breakdown in the bottom
Correct.
right quadrant? Okay.
Yes, so that it's kind of it's skewed a little bit because of the college students in the community. They spend a disproportionate amount of their income on housing during this period in their life because they know it's a short-term period. So yes, it does bring our numbers down a little bit.
And I don't ask that question necessarily because I disagree with the point you were illustrating, as you pointed out, the income realities in Brookings as we think about housing and think about affordable housing. I think this is important context for us to have. I just wanted some clarity on a couple of those numbers. Another question I had was related to slide 6. And I know that this is a topic that we've had to think really strategically about in Brookings, in particular because of our development challenges outside of the boundaries of where we've currently developed residential neighborhoods. But as I look at slide 6, I was wondering if you could clarify how much consideration we've given to existing lots where there may be rundown homes or properties that could certainly use upgrading, as we think about density and where there's already infrastructure in a neighborhood or on a block, but we know we could think about some of the center of Brookings housing. Is that reflected in these considerations?
So what this is really looking at is just undeveloped land. And I know where you're going with that. And we have looked at that. We've looked at a couple of areas. However, we haven't made those public, but we've studied them internally. And I think that would be a pretty good segue into, I need to introduce you to Aaron Carl. He is our GIS specialist. So about a year ago, you authorized the addition of GIS into my department. And so through a small government enterprise agreement between the city, the county, and Brookings Municipal Utilities, we were able to get the GIS software package at a little bit more favorable rate than if we were to go at it individually. And this is just one example of how sharing information back and forth. Aaron and his counterpart at BMU, Evan, they're really the masterminds behind the story map. As leaders, we come with ideas and kind of discuss it with them, and then we get out of their way and let them use their talent and expertise to put different things together. So yes, we have done an analysis of, I guess we would call it maybe what we feel is underutilized. Looking at the property tax that is currently being generated or valued and compared it against some other factors to try and figure out if there are certain areas where we thought were maybe more suitable for redevelopment opportunities and potentially, any reinvestment incentive type base to kind of encourage some of that. Ultimately, though, it still comes down to trying to get the willingness of the property owner to consider these, but not part of this study, but we have done that already.
I would just follow up with a comment to say that, the word I probably was looking for was redevelopment or reinvestment opportunities, and I think you encapsulated that really well. I have an affinity for kind of the central core of our community, and I do think there's some reinvestment and redevelopment opportunities there. So I'm happy we're thinking in those terms, and I know you've already put a lot of thought into that. So I'm certainly looking forward to continuing that conversation as we think about, in particular, residential development in Brookings, where there's existing infrastructure and opportunities to reinvest in existing neighborhoods. I had one other question, but I think it's for Jackie. So maybe if there are folks that have questions for Mike, it'd be most efficient
Good.
just to.
Anybody else have questions for Councilman Brink?
It's a question, but maybe also a comment. First, I would say this is a really impressive presentation, and it's really powerful. And I'm very appreciative of staff putting this together. I love the interactivity of the layered maps, and I think that's a really good way to tell the story. You mentioned that you've shared this with the Brookings Leadership Group. We're here tonight having this conversation. I know that this gets talked about in the development review team meetings. My question really would be, and I'm going to go back to the statistic where if we don't change anything about our residential development patterns, we have 15 years of land left. What other avenues maybe that we haven't explored can we use to help paint that picture for the community to really have everyone understand that? That's something I've heard about in Brookings for a long time, but I don't know that it's super common or that people really take that into consideration, why the importance of efficiencies and density really matters for our community. And I'm just curious if anyone has any comments on that or any genius ideas that we haven't tried yet, or is there a way that this council can help share that?
I would say continued conversations. It starts with a presentation like this, showing, for example, it's before us right now, the heart of the community and the challenges that we have with this map right here. And then it goes on to Mike's discussion about where we can grow and how we grow. I think here in the near future, we're going to bring forward that housing recommendation there in the 17th or 15th and 7th area. We need to provide some examples of how the higher density looks like, but how it can work in a neighborhood setting, something that's attractive but desirable as well. And so we have to offer those opportunities so people can look, see, feel it, and touch it. But I think we also have to constantly be talking about it. I think as we start consuming more and more land, the cost of land is going to go up even higher, the cost of infrastructure. I was talking to one individual today, and I often bring up Portland. Portland has a natural growth ring around it. And they've arbitrarily put it in place and said, we have to use that land the best we can. And otherwise, we have to redevelop. And it means they're constantly reinvesting in their community. We don't have that here. We're bound by those natural areas. So we constantly have to be mindful of our land and the reinvestment. But Councilmember Brink, you bring up a great point. How do we put this in front of people so they know why?
I wondered about an infographic that contains some of these maps that could be shared out in social media posts or in other ways, put on the website. I think with this great data that you have available in Chelsea's talents, I bet she could do something pretty great with that.
Great idea. Mike, did you have anything?
I really don't have anything else to add to that. I think the conversations, it's a philosophical change, a mindset, not only on the development community, but also on the market. Is the market willing to look at higher density? And that's where we have to be strategic with some of our open space. Do we need large lots? If there's open space parks nearby, you can still do some of the things that you would typically do in your backyard, but do you really need to consume large areas just for lack of better purposes, mowing? Or is there a better way to maximize the use of that existing space? It's not part of this discussion, but we would also like to show you where you can access some of the maps that have been put together from the city's webpage. Just for the public, we haven't really been promoting this a lot yet because with anything, it takes time to build it out. But from our homepage, you can get to, I believe it's under what, community and visitors?
Yep.
And then it's just city maps. And there are some of the maps that are available here that the public can access. And so if you click, this is our rental property map for the city of Brookings. It's pretty basic. It just shows the red areas. But if you click on one, it'll give you the address and the type of rental unit that it is,
And the last inspection.
and when it was last inspected.
That's clever. I like that.
So we're trying to build out some of the GIS capabilities and provide some of this information to the community so, they can be more informed. Paul mentioned we're using it. Aaron created an app for the snow removal letters, but he also did one this past summer for our stormwater technician when we were doing our sidewalk project, so that when they marked the sidewalks that are trip hazards, it was a much, much quicker way of documenting where the sidewalk issue was, and just through the app, a couple of clicks, selecting, boom, and everything is, it's automatically uploaded. So they're out in the field, and then somebody could be back at the office and seeing the data coming in. We have our annexation priorities. So there's just a couple of different examples, and then we've been trying to tie different documents to them to just try and be transparent and informative. Any questions on the future growth presentation?
Thanks again for doing
I
it.
think one question for city engineer then. Thank you, gentlemen.
I just had one remaining, and it was on the groundwater slide. Again, I thought that was a really compelling slide, and I liked how you, I think it was like maybe 8 or 9.
Let's see, was it the storm sewer pipe
It
map
was,
or the
yeah.
one right after that?
It was the one that showed the, this guy, yeah. So I really like how you illustrated for us the way water moves through our community. I think in particular, as we've continued to develop to the south, it's important to understand where water moves through different neighborhoods. As I look at this map, one of the things that jumped out to me was maybe in the southern part of the community, do you feel like there are enough ditches and waterways, is what they're labeled on this,
Oh, as
on
far as
this
the
map
channelized
coming
areas?
out of the existing developments? I mean, it seemed like there weren't all, if you think of them as tributaries that are draining water out of those southern neighborhoods, are there enough ditches and waterways coming out of our existing developments right now? When I look at the map, I was maybe surprised that those weren't denser.
These are the primary drainage pathways leading to the Big Sioux River. There are sub-tributaries where that come into these major areas. These are just the major ones.
Okay.
And then they'll flow from the pipe system, distribution system. But if it'd be helpful to have the sub-tributaries maybe a different color, we could surely do that.
It just seems that, as we have conversations in particular about residential development in that part of the community, that certainly is the first question that springs to folks' minds is drainage and water concerns. And this map was helpful for me, and the way you described it was helpful, but it was one of the first questions I had. So maybe that next layer that shows those other tributaries would give me some
Right.
peace of mind, and maybe
Yeah,
others too.
these are just the primary, the largest swale and ditch areas
Okay.
are shown in the green here. But we can
Thank you.
sure add that. That's a great idea.
Thank you, Jay.
If it gives the impression that there aren't that many drainage ways, that certainly wouldn't be the case. We'd
Sure.
want to add that.
What's interesting with this map also, when I first saw it, I didn't realize how many areas don't have underground systems, the culverts and what have you. But that's where we convey a lot of water through our street system. And so what's also nice, Jackie and I believe the other staff have been inputting, and Ope saw this at the very beginning, the various pipes that we have in here, when it was cleaned, when it was maintained. So it's all part of that process, especially when it comes springtime, to make sure that we're opening up the major areas we identify to get the water out of the system. So the more you see, the more questions you have, and to ask why.
Right. I think a lot of citizens would be surprised that not every street has storm sewer underneath it. And there, you can tell a big part of the mid pipe, a pipe system. And we don't have a lot of flooding in some of those areas, interestingly enough too, but it's more in the higher elevations as well. So there's different factors. But the public may be interested in that. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the future growth for now? If you think of them, you can just fire them off. And thank you, Jackie. Councilman Bacon, did you have any questions?
No, I'm fine. I've appreciated everyone else's questions. They answered mine.
Okay. Well, Council Member Brink asked that we have a discussion on fireworks, and so it's on there now, and I'm going to turn it over to the city manager this time.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. Just to give you a little bit of background, the City of Brookings, for those that don't know, does not allow the discharge of fireworks within the city limits. I didn't know that until the first month I was here, and I was planning on buying fireworks. State law does allow, however, municipalities to make that decision whether or not fireworks are allowed within the city limits. Councilmember Brink did request that this item be put on the work session to discuss fireworks season potentially for 2021. Things to consider when having this discussion includes the number of days allowed, time for discharge, number of tents, things of that nature for a community. I do have the fire chief here as well as the city attorney and city clerk to give you a little bit of background analysis they've found with some of the research that's allowed in the county, but across the state and other first-class cities as well. After we get a quick report from the department heads, probably turn it over to Councilmember Brink to take over the discussion. So Daryl, if you could provide council with a little bit of information on what you found of the first-class cities.
Once asked, I went in, and any community over 5,000 in population, I did research on. Out of those, we only had 2 anomalies. Everybody else, we fall right in line with. The only 2, one is Box Elder, which had a rapid growth here recently. They do allow it, but it's based on the grassland fire danger. In dry periods, it's not allowed. They do allow 5 days to shoot from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. The other anomaly was Mitchell, and I talked to a good friend of mine down there in the department. Really what that was all about was the lake that resides in the city. The landowners can shoot fireworks. So what they have done in turn is allowed them to discharge fireworks only on July 3rd and 4th between noon and 11:59 p.m. And it's anything except projectile fireworks that leave the ground. So otherwise, we are in line with, I think there's 18 communities. Our ordinances really reflect closely what they have.
Thanks, Daryl. And then Bonnie, I believe you did a little research on what the county allows in their process.
Yes, I did. I visited with county staff and found out that have an application fee or a process fee for those groups or events that want to do firework displays associated with a gathering or an event. What they do is they ask those individuals to come to a county commission meeting, and then they plead their case in front of the county, what they want to do. The county commission asks if they visited with the sheriff's office, if they visited with the fire department, did their due diligence, is there a fire ban in place? And then only with the approval of both the sheriff's office and the fire department would they issue the okay to those groups to do fireworks. If somebody wants to be a retail or sell fireworks in the counties, they do have to come forward to the county zoning board, and they have to apply for a conditional use permit. These businesses would be considered a seasonal retail stand, so they would have to come back annually and get approval to sell fireworks at county locations.
And then Steve, I didn't know if you wanted to add, I know you did a little historical research, but one thing I wanted to comment on the discussion. One thing I forgot to mention, this year, we didn't fund the fireworks display, and that was a decision made through the budget process because of the reduction in revenue. So I just wanted to point that out as well. But Steve, did you have any further comments on the history of fireworks here in Brookings or with the state?
I think our state statute gives the city the prerogative to set both the times, when it can be utilized within the city, which is the way our city ordinance has read for 30 years, I know for sure, because I look back at my prior ordinance versions back to 1991. So we have not allowed the use within the city. Other smaller towns, I have some experience where they do permit, discharging within the city, and I think Volga might allow that. With respect to sales, likewise, that falls in the same state statute. Cities have the prerogative to allow sales or to prohibit sales within the city limits. And of course, because we have a long-standing prohibition with respect to sales within the city, you see where fireworks have been sold over many years right outside the city limits. So, one might expect that those people who are right next to the city limits probably would prefer that the ordinance stay the same. It's hard to say, but I suspect that might be the case. So that would be, I guess, a little bit of history. So we do have prerogatives. And as far as the timing, that was an interesting comment that Darrell made, in terms of looking at the authority a city has to even parse the time frame and, the days in which you can discharge and cut that back from what state law generally allows, which would be the 2 time periods within the year around the 4th of July and New Year's. And it sounds like Mitchell allows a shorter period than state law, but that would be within the prerogative of what a city can do.
Councilmember Brink.
Clarifying question maybe for Bonnie. Do you know what the county's laws are regarding discharge? Is there anything that touches it?
No, there's nothing that touches it. They just questions, and it's somebody from a smaller community. They refer them to call their county finance officer.
And then, one follow-up comment would be with respect to fire danger.
Mm-hmm.
There would be that as part of the state statutes, with respect to county discharge of fireworks, that you'd be looking at what the fire or dryness of the terrain would be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this idea came about growing up doing fireworks in the state of South Dakota, probably illegally for most of my life. And I'm aware that there's plenty of places where people love fireworks. Let's be honest. I've lived in communities larger than Brookings where they're totally legal to discharge in city limits and sell them. I was visiting my sister last year in Georgia over New Year's, and the aerial fireworks going off in a very high-end residential district was astounding to me, but also totally fine and perfectly legal. So I know that it can be done. And really where this came from in my mind is I was thinking about the selling of fireworks. We know that kids love fireworks, and every year, you see these stands that crop up and kids beg their parents, and there's a retail opportunity there. And I wondered if that would be something that would, I've talked to a couple of folks who have asked about, doing this within city limits, or could they set up their shops within city limits. So I know that there's some interest in that. I don't know how pervasive it is, but for me, mostly this was about the ability to sell the fireworks, possibly in city limits. I'm more ambivalent about whether or not we allow people to do fireworks within city limits. I know that there's other models in some places where you can do things as long as they're not aerial. If they're fountains, if they're things like that, that's legal. And so, in thinking about a year where obviously we've had plenty of other things to do, but this was an idea that came up last summer, and so wanted to at least bring it forward and see what council thinks of this and see if anyone else is thinking along those lines. And Councilmember Wendell, right before we started tonight, you mentioned even fundraising opportunities with fireworks. And I was thinking about that too. If you got a church youth group that's trying to sell something to raise funds for their mission trip or something like that, I wondered if there's some opportunity there, and what that might look like. So that was the reason why I wanted this to come on the session. And so maybe I'll just pause there and see from my fellow council members what your thoughts are.
Council have questions or comments, or?
Yeah, so Chief Hartman, what are your thoughts on this being legal in city limits?
To be very honest, if you're going to sell them in the city limits, they're going to fire them in the city limits. If they're looking at novelty stuff, caps, smoke bombs, anything, and I believe the break-off is 0.25 grams of explosives. Anything under that is a novelty item. Anything above that is classed to fireworks. If you start selling fireworks in the city limits, we all know it already happens, but we will have more people firing fireworks in the city limits, which increases danger tenfold from what it already is.
So I'm completely against having the fireworks in town for a couple reasons. One, I mean, it's loud, right? And it's illegal right now, but I can still hear them well after the time limit, you know, where I live, and they're extremely loud. And also for those people that have PTSD, this is not just a little bit of a deal for them. This is a huge deal, where people with PTSD get scared, hide under their beds, they do things like that, and it's just a very scary situation. Even though it's just a bang to us, or to most people, to people with PTSD, it's a huge deal. I guess I don't care about the financing or the money that goes behind it. We make, you know, we can figure something else out, but I'm just not for it, and those are my reasons. I'll probably think of more as we're talking, but that's just my thoughts, guys. Yeah.
I forgot to mention, Dave Erickson, police chief, is on the phone if you guys have any questions. He does have some data and analysis of at least historical what's taken place here in Brookings. Councilmember Brink did ask me potential sales tax revenue. I did get a hold of a town in Kansas. You might guess which one it is. Similar size town in Brookings with a college in their backyard. They told me they produce anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 in sales tax revenue a year from their sales. They usually go about 5 to 6 days. And I can tell you they do have a lot of non-for-profits, church groups, and what have you, selling fireworks in the community.
Mayor Corbett,
Yes, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to add to what Joey was saying. In our neighborhood, we have a lot of dogs traumatized when folks shoot fireworks in our neighborhood, which happens every year. So I think that adds to, I think the PTSD thing is extremely serious, and we need to consider that. But we also have a lot of pets in our community and experience.
Councilman Niemeyer, were you going to say something? I saw you moving things around.
I guess I'll just, I'll side with Joey and Patty. The status quo that we have. You know, we've had some issues in the past, and has nothing to do with the sales of fireworks or where they're being fired off, but we have had some traumatizing type of injuries. I know there was a young man within the last decade that lost his hand, or both hands. There's been some other incidents, but that has nothing to do with the sales of the fireworks. You could do that outside of the city limits also, but just having such a dense area of property with numerous people on it, I think it sometimes invades on people's personal, how do you say, lives. You know, and Patty made a good comment too. I had a dog too that he would rip through his chain link fence trying to get away from the noise. So we just have a little bit more denser populations in the city limits. I know there's numerous places along the lakes and stuff that people use them. I go out to Lake Campbell just to enjoy the fireworks out there on the weekends of 4th of July myself. And then Darrell had made a comment too about fireworks only on a certain time on the 3rd and 4th down at Mitchell. But is that fireworks that goes airborne also, Daryl?
Can you repeat that again?
The fireworks that are shot off in Mitchell,
Yes.
is that airborne fireworks also?
Not in the city limits, no.
Okay.
Anybody else, comments or questions? Or
So I wondered if it would change anything for anybody if we thought about that a little differently. Let's think about to the premise. Not everybody likes fireworks, but a lot of people do, and they might also want to enjoy their property in that way or their lives in that way. So I'm aware of a community, also in Kansas, actually. I think that they set up a big, giant, open area, and there's, I think, authorities there, fire department, things like that, and then they basically have a day of it, and people can just come there and shoot their fireworks off. And they all do it in one place, so it's like supervised, and yes, there's a lot of people around, but they've come up with a way to do that safely. And it just seems to me that that's maybe one small pleasure that might be nice for some people to be able to partake of. If you think about it another way, all of the fireworks stands all over the state of South Dakota, we sell these things a lot of places, but they're not legal to use in most of our places, right? So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then I also think about the idea that we have all these stands that are right outside city limits. So of course it's Brookings residents that are going to buy these fireworks right outside of city limits. And I don't know that it would change that much if that stand was 50 feet in a different direction. That's my only thought on that. It could change behavior a lot, but it might not.
Councilman Collins?
I'd like to hear what Dave has to say, what his stats are.
Chief Erickson, you still there?
I am, thank you. So looking back historically, especially last year, we had 60 total complaints regarding fireworks. 11 of those were outside of that 4th of July week, primarily around the New Year's time frame. But so 49 complaints that we received within the 4-day window surrounding the 4th of July that our officers are responding to. By legalizing, I'm not sure if that would increase our complaints. I suppose a lot of it would come down to how well it's communicated with our citizens that it is actually legal, or it still remains against city ordinance. So I wonder how much activity that would create for our officers. And another thing that, like Daryl brought up, was about Box Elder and their regulating whether it's a dry year or a wet year, depending on if they allow it. To me, that seems like it could be a potential communication nightmare to our community of, okay, this year it is legal and next year it may not be, sort of thing. So I guess I'm in favor of leaving the ordinance as it's written. We deal with enough complaints regarding the fireworks, and Councilmember Brink, I'm with you. I love shooting fireworks, but I don't know if, from the law enforcement perspective, if that would be very wise thing to do at this point in time.
Noted. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, what do we want to do? Just let this rest for a while?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think anyone else is interested in moving forward with this. So I think we can drop it, but I do think it was interesting to learn all of this. I appreciate the staff time and research, and be interesting to see. Yeah, thank you for including this.
Mayor Corbett?
Yes.
Leah did make one comment about space that everybody could go to. I kind of like that idea, but that's about the only part that I like about it. It's someplace other than in the residential areas, so that we don't bother our neighbors. Not everybody likes it. So, and like everybody else, when I was a kid, I couldn't wait for 4th of July to come around because Mom would allow us to do it for about a week, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, having a community area is not a bad idea. If we could find that spot, so.
And I know that would also implicate our fire department and other staff for that too. So I understand that that could be a resource challenge.
Amazing thing, after council member or council comments, I'll get emails and phone calls from people about, have you thought about, and somebody might surface right now saying, hey, I've got a thought. So we'll keep this discussion alive for a while, but I
Mayor?
understand. As long as you can't buy M88s anymore, why
Yeah.
have fireworks? But anyway,
Mayor, if I may
Yes,
have a
Chief.
second, just for educational purposes, we have weddings and some events where they do want to shoot fireworks. There is an avenue to do that. They have to come in, request the form. We actually have a form that's got to be completed. We have to review what they want to shoot, where they want to shoot. We also do this in our protection area in the county. So there are legal avenues for other displays, for, outside of the July 4th and New Year's events. There are legal ways of doing that. And we just do a good review on what's going to be shot, where it's going to be shot, those types of things. So there are some avenues to do some special events for
nice
fireworks.
to know. Thanks, Chief. Well, let's look ahead to next Tuesday night. We've got 2 abatements from the Board of Equalization coming before us. And then we'll introduce Jeremy Lindstedt, our new street department manager, a proclamation recognizing Ashley Ragsdale for receiving the South Dakota Art Award. First reading on a COVID ordinance. And then looking ahead, we got a fee structure update, discussion about BMU, and then it'll be time for the city progress report by the Assistant City Manager, the COVID-19 update. Anything else that's popping up? Okay, well, you know what to do then. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good night.